Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Best on Wellbeing podcast. We continue the discussion today about spirituality and what it means to be spiritual. I kind of come from more of a school of thought that when we say we're spiritual, it's very simple. It's not really anything special in terms of new special ideas. Like sometimes, we stop being religious, we become spiritual. So instead of believing in life after death in terms of heaven or hell, now we believe in reincarnation or things like that. So we kind of just end up replacing one set of beliefs with another, which is fine. I'm not opposed to people's belief systems in terms of the afterlife and the astral realm and things like that. But my view is that spirituality is very grounded in day-to-day life in terms of having a way of being in the world that ultimately supports our own well-being and just ability to find a certain joy to the best that we can in the everyday, ordinary routine of life. And that's what spirituality, in my view, is all about. So 4 basic principles that we'll cover quickly today. Number 1 is radical responsibility over our own happiness and well-being. So this can be a little bit of a tricky one because some people do come from very difficult backgrounds, difficult childhoods, abuse, in more severe cases, rape, incest, war-torn countries. I don't come from these backgrounds, so it's very maybe easy for me to proclaim radical responsibility over one's happiness and well-being. But nevertheless, for folks who've had very difficult situations in their lives, traumatic situations, it is still the way forward because ultimately the journey towards our well-being is assuming a radical responsibility over our own happiness and well-being, meaning that we don't give the power on anything outside of us to determine how we ought to be experiencing our own sense of well-being, that it becomes an internal process entirely. Now, I don't want to dehumanize this. There's going to be situations in life that are tragic, God forbid, something would happen in my life, someone I'm close to that dies suddenly and tragically, I'll be thrown into a whirlwind for sure. And, my ability to stay in a present moment, sort of serene state of mind will be completely perturbed and thrown off, okay, because of an external circumstance. So I don't want to be naive about this. But eventually, facing that tragedy or facing whatever that difficult challenge is or situation, in order to restore a sense of inner joy and peace, will require for me to go within myself and alter how I'm interacting with it, how I'm interacting with that external circumstance in order to restore my well-being, to restore a sense of peace and inner joy is a very internal process. And there's some stories, a lot of accounts of people who have been in the middle of genocides, for example, in awful conditions. I can't even imagine these conditions. And they discover a certain peace when they internalize, when they made it completely about their internal experience. It was their source of joy was entirely within them and independent of what's happening outside of them. It's radical, okay? This is pushing the envelope because sometimes we can be pulled into a mindset of victimhood. And some people have been true victims of, again, abuse, of war, of murderers. Like there's bad things that happen, and some people are at the receiving end of this. So this is not to deny this. But once the tragedy has occurred, the path towards healing is still an inner journey. It's still an inner reframing. If we believe that we can never be happy again, or ever be joyous again, or never be well again because of something outside of ourselves, then it's very difficult to truly heal. But if we assume radical responsibility and understand that the wellspring, the source of our joy and well-being is within us and not dependent on something external to us, then the possibility of a true healing and restoring of well-being and joy and happiness and peace within is made possible. For another, one clear example, the most classic example is Viktor Frankl, who was a psychiatrist, who got taken into the concentration camps of Nazi Germany. His children died, his wife died. Like, he was the only survivor of this very atrocious condition. But he does report in his book that he wrote afterwards that he discovered these states of peace in the midst of these awful conditions. So very remarkable fella. But it points to the possibility, the human possibility, not easy. I'm not saying for folks who've been through very difficult things that this is an easy thing, but it is the only way forward if we're truly determined to apply ourselves to a sense of well-being, of truly experiencing life on a deeper level. Now, in terms of our more ordinary lives, okay, I just wanted to put aside the more sort of drastic occurrences that can happen for people, that have happened for people. But for many of us, and let's say in my sort of situation, there's ups and downs in life. There's difficult situations sometimes, but overall, we're talking about more sort of the ups and downs of ordinary life, where we get an argument with our spouse, or we're worried about our finances, or we're worried about different things at work, new challenges, something's going on with our children. There's all sorts of life challenges. And when we start to think in our minds, when that external situation is different, then I'll be able to be happy. That's a very disempowering thing, because things on the outside we can rarely control. Okay, we can influence, we can work towards, let's say, financial responsibility and financial discipline, and try to improve our communication with, people that we're having challenges with. There's all sorts of very useful things we can do on the outside level. But if we come from a mindset that our inner well-being is dependent on those outside things, it disempowers us, okay? Well-being starts from the radical responsibility that I can look at this differently. I can approach this internally differently. It's kind of similar to sort of a bit of the Stoic philosophy. There's always a way to frame things a little bit differently within your own mind, in order to look at it a little bit differently on the outside and restore a little bit less internal conflict and less dissonance and less suffering, because we make the decision to assume our own happiness from within. So radical responsibility over our own happiness and well-being, I believe, is an important principle to truly live the spiritual life. That's it for today, folks. We're going to continue reviewing some of the other principles in subsequent episodes. Have a good day.